If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
Win. So playing without their starting point guard, Jalen Brunson, who missed Thursday night's game with a non-COVID illness, the Knicks notched one of their most important wins of the season. New York squeaked by the Miami Heat 106-104. It was a seesaw battle, saw big runs by both teams. New York would go up double digits in the fourth quarter, but surprise, surprise, Miami hung tough, kept the game close, kept it very interesting down the stretch. The Knicks made some major blunders in the last minute of this game that almost gave Miami a chance to win. They did have a chance to win at the buzzer. Tyler Hero missed a corner three that hit back iron that allowed the Knicks to secure this one. The Knicks were led by RJ Barrett, who had a bounce-back performance after his benching against Los Angeles. He had 30 points in this game. Newly minted All-Star Julius Randle added 23 and 10 for the Heat. Bam Adebayo, who was spectacular last night. I mean, man, you want to talk about a guy who cemented why he needs to be an All-Star, why he was an All-Star. Bam was sensational. He had 32 in this one in the loss for Miami. New York now is 28 and 25 on the season, one game back of the coveted 6th seed that is currently held by the Miami Heat. So this was a very important win as the Knicks kind of start off this head-to-head duel with the Heat moving forward. They have 3 more games left to go in this season, so plenty more matchups that could be critical for that 6th and final clinched playoff spot. You have the play-in situation where you can still get into the playoffs, but of course you got to win some high intense, high leverage games in order to get in. So you want to get that 6th spot and avoid that situation. So, Tommy, how did the Knicks pull this one off without Jalen Brunson?
Huge win for the Knicks. An ugly win, but a win nonetheless, as we've said many times this season. On April 9th or whatever date the season ends, they're not going to ask you how they looked, and there's no aesthetically pleasing category. There's just W's and L's, and the Knicks got a W yesterday. Obviously, Julius Randle played really well. We'll discuss him in length a little bit later in the second segment when we talk a little bit about the All-Star stuff. Big gain for obviously RJ Barrett. Bounced back after getting benched the end of the final 12 minutes of regulation and into overtime Tuesday against the Lakers. I'm going to take it a little bit different, though. I'm going to start 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Jimmy Butler hits a layup. Heat are up 69-66, 3-point lead, 2 minutes left in the third. Knicks fans are nervous, and they should be, because the Knicks bench, and obviously, with 10 minutes into the second half, it's about time you got to start yanking starters. Randall's running out of gas. Barrett's slowing down, and the Knicks bench was badly outplayed in the first half. Miami reserves outscored the Knicks reserves 20-5, outscored them by 15 points. And this shouldn't be surprising, because when IQ played really well as a starter replacing Brunson earlier in the season, but the bench is abominable without when you don't, especially when you take IQ out. Even with IQ in the lineup as their most productive bench player, they're near the bottom of the league in most statistical categories. When you slide IQ into the starting lineup, now you're really at a deficit there. So I'm thinking Knicks down 3, 2 minutes to go in the third. Is Miami really going to go on a run here and put this game out of reach? As it turns out, the opposite happens. Deuce McBride knocks down a big 3-pointer. Pair of free throws from Ihart, pair of free throws from Evan Fournier. Knicks go up by 5. Take that lead in the fourth quarter. First possession, fourth quarter, Obi hits a 3. A minute later, Deuce, another big 3. Over the next couple of Knicks possessions, Obi hits a nice little fadeaway from 15 feet out near the foul line, and then gets a layup. With about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Knicks are up 90-81. As we know, the Knicks need some breathing room, because they're going to give back some points in the fourth quarter. And Miami, as it happens, is one of the best come from behind teams in the fourth quarter in the entire league. I think it's 9 games they've won when trailing by double digits. So they have a propensity to fall behind and then come back late. Jimmy Butler, gets focused and et cetera. So to me, obviously we'll talk about the crazy final minutes and possessions, et cetera. But to me, the Knicks had they would have lost that game had they, I thought they were if you ask me honestly, I thought they probably were going to lose that game in that little 6-minute stretch there, bridging the end of the third to the start of the fourth. So I thought a lot of credit goes to the guys, Toppin, McBride, even Fournier had made some shots, played a little bit better defensively. Hartenstein has been really good. Continued his solid play late. So I thought I just didn't want it to get lost in the mix how important that little stretch of time was.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like you said, the bench got completely washed in that first half, and it looked like, oh man, whenever this bench comes in, it's gonna be a problem. And a lot of people saw how the Knicks started off kind of slow in that third quarter, and then the bench guys come in, and Evan Fournier's coming in. You're like, oh man, the Heat may run away with this one now, and they held serve, and they really battled. They picked it up defensively. They made some shots when they needed to. So much credit to the bench for picking it up in the second half. I mean, Deuce McBride going 3 for 3, 2 for 2 from 3. I mean, that's massive. I mean, you're not expecting to get anything from Deuce McBride. So you get 8 points on 3 shots, no misses. That's awesome. 2 assists to go along with that. That's a huge game. Evan Fournier, terrible defensively still. He made 1 3, but struggled with his shot, but did have 4 assists. So he had some assists. He had a big steal that actually led to a foul that allowed him to get some free throws. So at the end of the third quarter, so he contributed. It's crazy how much he's fallen off from last season, but the fact that he was able to contribute something in that second half was critical. And like you said, Isaiah Hartenstein, 10 rebounds off the bench, 29 minutes. It's like I said before, it really does feel like he is starting to play like the player Tibbs wanted him to be. Now, it's not his game per se, but the way he's defending the rim, the way he's throwing his body around, the way he's attacking the glass, both in the offensive glass and the defensive glass. He had 4 offensive rebounds in this game. I mean, he was a beast on the glass. You get 4 offensive rebounds, 29 minutes. That's exceptional. So credit to the bench. Obi Toppin came in, brought in a lot of energy. So great job by them.
And real quick, just because you mentioned Obi and Hartenstein there, finally Tibbs is using those guys, putting those guys at the nail, which is the center of the free throw, and against the zone, especially against the zone. It's taken them 50+ games and 2+ years, but finally it looks like they figured out a way to beat the zone, get the ball into the middle of the floor, and have those guys spray the ball out towards the corners. And both of those guys took turns in at least a couple of possessions. And Miami plays a ton of zone, and the Knicks were relatively effective against it last night. So hopefully we'll see that going forward.
Yeah, that was critical because we know how much the Knicks have struggled with zone defense, and here you're playing against maybe the best zone defense in the league. I mean, Miami plays zone regularly, essentially, and they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. So, I mean, this seemed like a terrible matchup once Miami started sitting in that zone, and you saw what happened in the first half. You're like, oh, here we go again. And second half, they seemed to have something for Miami. We saw Hartenstein and Toppin, as you mentioned, be effective in that nail position. Toppin hit a turnaround fadeaway. Hartenstein made some plays from there, whether he dishing it out or scoring. So credit to Tibbs for making that adjustment finally after, again, 2 years of watching this nonsense of them being able to score, not being able to score against zones. We talk about the play of RJ Barrett. I got to say, I really think he deserves a lot of credit. Now, it was not a perfect game. He did have 5 turnovers. Defensively, I thought he kind of killed the Knicks in the start of that fourth quarter because they got up and he made some defensive lapses on Tyler Hero. Actually, it might have been the third quarter, actually. Hero made 3 straight threes. 2 of them were RJ Barrett just seemingly either slow to react or not paying attention to Hero, and that allowed the Heat to kind of get quickly right back into the game. Hero went on a 9-0 run by himself. So Barrett had some struggles defensively, but I want to stress the positive because when you have a game like you had against Los Angeles where he was killing the Knicks defensively, where his offense was hit or miss to say the least, to come back against another really good team in Miami, a game where everybody's looking at you because you didn't talk to the press. You talked about you made it clear that you were unhappy with how that other game ended. To finish with 30 points to help close this game out. It wasn't a great last minute of the game once the Heat switched Jimmy Butler onto him, and I think he's got to be better at anticipating how the Heat are going to defend him differently once he gets going. They started blitzing the screens more. They were trying hard, to their credit, to get the switch on to Tyler Hero. Jimmy Butler and the Heat, knowing how to play defense and being as seasoned as they are, they did not allow RJ to get those switches, and it caused some possessions where they didn't really get much out of them. But up until that point, he had some big baskets to keep the Knicks ahead of me. Some of these finishes, the left-hand finish, I know he's left-handed, but some of these finishes where he's like diving into the crowd almost and scooping it up and getting it in. I mean, he was spectacular. He didn't make any 3-pointers, but his ability to continue to attack the paint and realize that there was Kyle Lowry guarding him, which was a bizarre decision by Eric Spoelstra to me to start the game. I think that helped RJ get into a rhythm. He's playing against a guy who's 6'1", if he's lucky, or Tyler Hero. Some of these matchups, he knew these guys were food. Gabe Vincent's a decent defender, but Gabe Vincent is 6'2". So he just taking these guys into the paint. He was bullying them all night, and he had a really big game. So I definitely want to give RJ Barrett his flowers because the Knicks needed this one, and he was the best player on the floor for the Knicks. Bam was the best player overall. But RJ Barrett, they wouldn't have won this game without him for sure.
RJ, a huge bounce back game. The thing you like about Barrett, and you liked it since the second he got here, is he'll play awful for 47 minutes and hit a big bucket down the stretch. He'll miss his first 7 shots, feel confident taking his 8th. He'll have a bad month and come back with a great 3 weeks. Tibbs talked about it after the game. The thing I love about RJ is I always believe he's going to bounce back. And that's what we saw after that game. So credit to him. As you know, there were some defensive deficiencies, which unfortunately we've come to expect at this point. The Hero 9-0 run was incredibly frustrating. Barrett dies on a screen. Sims goes into drop coverage. They also gave up an easy 3-pointer to Strus when you can't give up a 3-pointer. We'll talk about that in the closing seconds. RJ was a net -1 in the game. He was the only starter that posted a net, a plus minus negative. But like you said, and he did have those turnovers in the closing seconds. But the Knicks wouldn't have been in position to win, to give up those turnovers and still win if he didn't put the team on his back offensively in the second half. With no Brunson in the lineup, the Knicks knew they needed RJ to step up, and he did just that. To me, the key was his approach and his mentality, particularly in the second half. The best version of RJ is the aggressive version of RJ. He can knock down some threes, and he'll go through a stretch where he shoots 40% from 3, but he's never going to be a knockdown elite 3-point shooter. So he's going to have to finish better at the rim, and just as importantly, attack the rim, get to the free throw line, attack the basket. It's exactly what he did. First half, he was 4-11 from the floor, and not coincidentally, he took 4 3-pointers and missed all 3 of them. Second half, made a clear, determined effort to attack the tin. He took 12 shots in the second half. 11 of them were in the paint. 10 of them were right at the rim. He made 9 of those shots, scored 20 points on just 12 attempts. That's the RJ that the Knicks need to see. And one other thing, because you mentioned it, I had seen Lowry's. I haven't watched a ton of Heat this year. I've seen games here and there, and I've seen Lowry's numbers. They look awful, and I've heard Heat fans bellyache about how poorly he's played. It did not prepare me for just how washed he looked last night. I mean, he looked acid washed, bro. Like he looked like, you made him look like he was in quicksand. Trying Barrett going around him like a traffic cone. I don't know what the Heat do with that situation. It's funny. We'll talk about the Kyrie and can they get some type of point guard? If anybody's in a Heat culture can turn Kyrie around. I don't know, but if you're a Heat fan and you want to, or if you have a bet on the Heat to make a run of the finals or something like that, you got to hope that they address that point guard position, because maybe again. Maybe Lowry's dealing with a little nagging injury. He just didn't play his best game. We'll see the Heat 3 more times over the next 2 months, but that was not encouraging from a Heat fan perspective.
Yeah, I felt like the Kyle Lowry signing I thought was highly overrated when it happened, and then the comments that happened. I actually got some heat, no pun intended, from I think Heat fans when I tweeted like at the end of the season, they lost and Lowry was not good in the playoffs, and Eric Spoelstra's up there saying, we know next year he's going to get in the best shape of his life, and we expect a different Kyle Lowry. And I'm like, maybe he just has to say that, but that sounded so delusional to me. Even in June when he's talking about that I actually had to do a double take. I'm like, Kyle Lowry's 36, 37. How are you expecting him to get into the best shape of his life at this point in his career and turn into the old Kyle Lowry? And watching that game on Thursday night, it was wild because we've seen Kyle Lowry a lot. He played a long time in the Atlantic Division against the Knicks. So you're watching him 4 times a year. He's an Iron Man. He's a guy who usually plays every night, doesn't miss a lot of games. And I mean, he usually kills the Knicks. So anytime, Lowry gets the ball, typically I kind of already have to kind of hold my breath because I'm anticipating a big 3 happening somewhere, a big charge happening somewhere. the Knicks never beat Toronto, as we know, and we've seen this year, and they never beat them when Kyle Lowry was running the point for them. So when you watch that game that night, it was like, what is going on there?
He's kind of like that a Heat, another Heat point guard, Tim Hardaway. He always seemed to play his best against the Knicks, and the other thing about Lowry, you mentioned the contract. He's making $28.3 million this season and is due another $29.7 million next season. So when you think of value, you think about Jalen Brunson getting $5 million, millions dollars less than that. It goes to show you. And he'd also have Duncan Robinson. The two of those guys combined, Lowry Robinson, will make $48 million next year. And then Robinson still has another 2 years and $39 million left on his deal. So Pat Riley, you hate to see it for such a nice guy, seems to be a little bit of trouble out there down in South Beach.
Yeah. Very humble, very trustworthy guy in Pat Riley. Right. He's definitely made some mistakes that it's hard to erase right now for this team. And, I guess credit to him that he's able to kind of find some replacements, whether it be a Max Strus, whether some of these unheralded guys that they find. It seems like these guys just fall off a truck somewhere, and they give them a Heat uniform and they can contribute. Highsmith was playing yesterday. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but he's making plays. It's like, I don't know where they find him.
I think it's 8 undrafted players in their rotation. If I'm Miami, I'm starting Gabe Vincent. Seriously considering starting Gabe Vincent over Lowry at this point, because again, Lowry, we'll see. But that's I
mean, Gabe Vincent can defend a little bit. It's a problem. Miami's gonna have to address that. And when we talk about as we wrap this up and hear the final minute of this game, I think in some ways, like, this game was very interesting. I'm glad the Knicks won, but it almost felt like this was watching the Knicks of 2021, 2022, or even 2020, 2021, where it was essentially like them just trying to hold on for dear life. And because they don't have a real point guard, they turn the ball over left and right. Like, Julius Randle had 7 turnovers. RJ Barrett had 5 turnovers. The Knicks, who are a low turnover team, had 17 in this game, because a Heat team that can turn you over, because that defense, with the zone and stuff, can be confusing. But it was kind of just hold on for dear life. And that's continues to be a problem now. We've seen, even with Jalen Brunson, they've had problems closing games. Now, hasn't necessarily been because of turnovers. It's usually just been because the offense has been kind of like meandering. But last night it was like
at least they can inbound the ball when they have Brunson on the court. That's one benefit of having an actual point guard.
Yeah, inbound the ball, things that they can actually do, simple things they can simple plays they can make, they can do, even if they don't get good shots. Even if the inbounds is just giving it to Julius Randle in the corner against Anthony Davis, they can at least get the ball in.
Exactly. And one other thing on that closing moments, and we're going to give Julius some flowers when we talk about his All-Star berth. Obviously, the turnover is frustrating, but to me, maybe the greater sin was dunking the ball with 5 seconds left after that Grimes. If he just dribbles into the corner, game's over. There's absolutely no reason to go for a basket right there. And it almost came back to bite him.
Yeah, and it's funny because I saw someone tweet that, and like in the moment, like, I'm just happy the Knicks are going to secure this win. By the way, a crazy scenario. The Knicks turn over, Heat turn over, Knicks turn over, then they get it back. Crazy scenario. But like, Julius finishes with the dunk. It was a tough, hard-fought game. So you think, okay, this is the end. Then someone said, "Oh, why did you just dribble it out?" And then I looked at the replay. There is no Heat in the
Nobody's
near him. No. And there's only about 4 seconds left. He easily could have just dribbled to the corner and nobody would have been around him. So yeah, you wish he had a little more wherewithal there. I think the adrenaline of thinking that game's going to slip away and them getting that steal. Great play, great hustle by Isaiah Hartenstein, who for whatever reason during the season, I think so many times I've seen him not get that loose ball.
Yes.
Like times where it looks like he's just stuck in quicksand. Somehow he found the Jets to get to that loose ball, outrunning one of those Heat guards. To get it and it made a great play to get it over to Quentin Grimes. Grimes again, maybe should have held it, gave it to Julius, who then dunked the ball. And then look, defensively, again, I Clyde said it. I don't know how Strus gets open so easily for that 3 at the top of the corner, at the top of the key. Like you they need a 3, and he's a deadly shooter. Like he's the guy that nobody should be leaving. And if you get picked, you got to switch. Somehow he gets a wide open look. That didn't make any sense. I also. And I said it while I was watching the game. I kind of thought, to be honest, RJ's gotten in this position where I'm taking him out in the last position of the game. Like, he's guarding Tyler Hero. Why was that? Like, Tyler Hero is the guy I was probably most afraid of getting a shot off, and who had his moments against RJ in this game, even though RJ was cooking him as well. Hero had 25 points in this one. I'm like, why isn't Deuce in the game? I said that a lot. I'm like, why isn't Deuce in the game? Like to me, like you're trying to win this game. I'm not caring about feelings. You didn't care about feelings against LA. So you damn sure shouldn't care about feelings. Now, this is a game you absolutely have to win. I'm saying, hey, RJ, you played great. Come stand next to me. If this goes into overtime, something, we'll put you back in. But we need our best defensive players on the floor. I wanted to see Deuce McBride guarding Hero in that possession, not RJ Barrett. And I think it almost cost him because RJ, who I think is a little slow-footed, Hero just runs right past him, beats him, he gets screened. Thankfully, Julius was paying attention and was able to get a pretty decent contest. But it wasn't like he was all over him. Hero had a good look at that. Yes. He just missed, So the end of game execution continues to be a problem. But the Knicks did squeak this one out, and they did play extremely hard without their leader, Jalen Brunson. So credit where credit is due. Knicks win this one. Like I said, they go to 28-25 on the season. One game back of the Miami Heat for the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference.